So I'm starting to put up the maturity model. What do you guys think of this view of our journey? Because the playbook maps to level 1, level 2, level 3. So what we've been working on with Phil is he's in level 1, which we've been thinking through with him and building out some of our notes around, right? So actually the model, the playbook approach, it seems to be working in that regard. And we've been having great conversations, and it maps to this view. So 1, 2, 3.
Right.
So we've been going through the 5 milestones here. We started in 6 and 7 with Phil, but I wanted to see what you guys thought of this view plus superimposed onto the maturity view, where we've got kind of a foundation. We've got orchestration down the left, people, process, information, technology. We've got response enablement to commercial enablement. Commercial enablement is kind of this level 3, where it rolled up of talent, message, pipeline, organizational enablement. That's what level 3 would look like. Response enablement, there's value in that. Working on the rapid response side, like, you know, the shift to COVID, and because of COVID, the virtual kickoffs and all the virtual shifts and stuff, you have to be really responsive. So that's the emergent piece, and building out those, you know, capabilities and skills to make those pivots, and then starting to operationalize around workflows, eventually services, and then adding on to the services, the data, the dashboards, the, you know, organizational components, maybe even down the road, internal consulting, who knows? So what do you guys think of this view, and anything you'd want to change on it, or from your past experience, anything that's missing?
So one thought when it comes to technology. So at level 1, it says automation with streamlined workflows. Yes, absolutely. Now, my question is, the automation, is that regarding basically the workflows, so workflows automation, or is it also about asset automation? Because my experience is that automation of various types of asset creation normally comes more towards the shift between level 2 and level 3. And when I say asset automation, I'm thinking about, for example, for sales managers, assets that they can have, so when they go into a pipeline review, for instance, that they just have to click on a button, and the pipeline review deck that they need for that particular pipeline meeting, that is automatically produced for them. Or if they have a performance review with one of their sales guys, again, that performance review deck is automatically created. No one has to take any time out of you know, the being in front of the customer and so on. Sales operations don't have to do anything. It's automatically created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I think I definitely had a view of assets later on. This is more around the actual process. Like, for example, Phil talked about intake last week and how he's intaking requests. Adding some workflow automation to that intake process, whether it's approvals or you know, prioritization, that type of thing would happen in level 1 to get more standardized. And that's what I'm thinking as far as creating, like, like what happens in my mind in level 3 is leveraging like machine learning to create account plans. Using
Yeah, yeah,
publicly available information and maybe insights generated through CRM. Can you push a button and create account plans, or at
yeah.
least half
Or
of
it
one?
creates parts of the account plans.
Right, right,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I have a
Hey,
question.
yeah, sure.
Can you expand on dot connecting synthesis driven systems thinking across enablers? That strikes me as kind of vague. And I want to make sure I understand what it means.
Yeah, I was laying the foundation around this idea that 1 + 1 = 3 at some point in level 1, where you have individuals in the emergent foundation. At some point, they need to become a team. And that means that team has to operate in a way that is synthesizing, for example, pipeline data with training plans, right? They're connecting the dots on our pipeline. We're having trouble, I don't know, getting access. Let's map our training and our cadence to getting access and adjust the message. We're connecting dots across message, salespeople, training and tools, and we're synthesizing this into something that's simple enough for salespeople to use with customers. So we're not doing more, giving them more. We're providing something that's synthesized into a simple view that salespeople can use. So we're doing the work on behalf of them across the enablement team, as opposed to I'm in enablement, I do this project thing over here, somebody else is responsible for this other thing over there. We all have our individual projects that we work on. Yeah, we have staff meetings, but the only thing we talk about is our quarterly get together. We're not really synthesizing across all of our initiatives to get leverage across our enablement work.
Okay, that helps.
So, and then if you don't have that foundation, it's really hard to get to level 2, because if you're trying to get to level 2 and there hasn't been some sort of basic teaming, which means they haven't had the horse trading discussions on enablement. And enablement here means, it's message, messenger, it's pipeline, it's organizational, right? It's broader than just a kickoff conversation where you're working cross-functionally. It's enabling with cross-functional support. So when you get to level 2 and you start having to horse trade with product and marketing, and you can't even horse trade on your own team to figure out how you have a unified view function to function, it's really hard to get to level 2.
Got it.
So that functional view can't happen, where enablement's clear what service it's providing vis-a-vis product or field marketing, for example. So I'll talk to Phil. Phil's really good at building stuff. Phil, I want to only work with Phil. Well, Phil doesn't represent the entire enablement function. He's one person, but he's got skills. How do we get to a functional view? Because that's what we're trying to get to in between level 1 to level 2, is moving from individual contributor to a functional atomic building block we can build on. Sorry, Helena, what were you going to say?
Yeah, so I was thinking when it comes to people, does that in any of the levels include the role definitions of
enablement team?
No.
Of salespeople?
Actually both of the enablement team, but I was also thinking about the customers that they are enabling, like
Yeah,
field marketing and so on.
Yeah, I view the customer view of it, like, for example, let's say they're working with 2 different sales teams. If I'm doing talent enablement, in the talent enablement space, I should have a profile or understand what I'm enabling to. What's the spec of that, those sales team members or marketers or CSRs that I'm supporting, right? Or BDRs. So that's a talent enablement service, not in the maturity model view. The maturity model would say, okay, have you provided the service or the projects in support of enabling talent? Are you in the talent enablement business within a business, or are you random access sales enablement? When you start moving into the talent enablement business within a business, you probably are building role definitions. And a lot of, Phil can talk to this more, but he does a lot of role-based work to develop a spec, if you will, of who he's enabling. And that's part of the service he provides in enablement. As far as it's interesting, the role definition of enablers, we're a fascinating bunch. A lot of sales enablement people don't really do professional development. Where are you going to get it from? There's really no definition of, sales enablement practitioner. There's courses and there's topics, but what does it mean to be a sales enablement leader or professional? And how do you develop your operating model of different roles within enablement? That's something that I could see us doing here at Orchestrate Sales, but I haven't seen a lot of work around that out in the market. I don't know if anybody else has, but those are my 2 points of view on in level 1. You should have an understanding of the audience you're serving or audience you're selling to internally. When you get to level 2 and 3, I definitely think if you're providing talent enablement services, you've got specs or role profiles that you are working with HR and the business on to understand what a good salesperson looks like and how we skate to the puck from a skill and knowledge perspective, if you're in talent enablement. So I don't know what you guys think of that, but, and feel free to chime in because I was speaking for you. That's how I see that, Helena. And I don't have all the answers. I'm just providing a point of view.
Yeah, I also definitely see it as two different roles, if you like, or to define, i.e. both the ones of the enablers, the roles of the enablement team or function, and also the roles that we are serving. Because I think that is absolutely vitally important, because if there isn't a clear definition and terminology around who we are serving across the company, then, well, it's just bound for several mistakes arising from that fact alone.
Yeah. Now we're back to the North Star vision a little bit. Phil, did you have anything you want to add on the role piece before I move on? Thanks for joining, by the way. We're just talking about this maturity model view, and I don't know if you have any feedback on this, but it's a new thing we've been working on as a team. Oh, you're on mute, or you're actually unmuted, but I can't hear you. No. Your lips are moving, but nothing's coming out. Weird.
Super weird.
And you've been hacked by the pipeline.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. You're like really faint.
Hello.
There we
Super.
go. A little bit.
Yeah, super faint though.
Let me change the mic input because
Like the mic level's really low. Is there a input level somewhere?
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good. That's perfect.
Now you're really low, but that's okay. We'll figure it out. There we go.
Yeah, I definitely can hear you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
We'll put the technology away. So I think that the role component is really overlooked. I'm just like staring at where it says level 2 effective and insight driven, right? And everyone's like, we need more sales, we need more pipeline, we need more training, but they don't like, it doesn't mean it's the right training, and it's because we're not like focusing in on the role architecture of who needs what training specifically and the messaging of that said training, right? It's, you know, I'll give you an example. In our business, everybody gets trained on everything all the time because everyone needs to be an expert at everything. Well, ESB agents and enterprise agents have completely different conversations. We need to be talking about how do we position this product with our suite of products in a sales, in a team of like an activated pod at the enterprise level. Like, who is the team sellers in this situation? We know who the agent is, but the agent's really not responsible for the end goal of the quota attainment at the enterprise level, right? It's the team of sellers in that equation. So we're force feeding the agent thinking that that one person is going to change everything, when in reality we need to make sure that they understand their role in that sales team, in that pod that's activated with that level of customer, right? And I'm just, it's you know, and I don't think we think about that, you know, or at least, you know, in our organization, we don't think about that enough. It's about, well, just add the product, push the product. Maybe part of that is the breakage in the go-to-market strategy and saying that this is the target industry and this is the target buyer. So therefore it must be true, as opposed to what the actual sales journey looks like and the people in that journey. So I feel like we're looking at the end goal in the data, but we're not actually using the data to be specific about how we're targeting the enablement activity.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions that get made. It's really, so for example, our go-to-market is we're in this market, therefore we sell to these personas, and all we have to do is, it's a numbers game. And that is so, when you start double clicking into all of that, that is so not how it happens. And the appetite to understand what really happens in conversations is hard to come by.
Hey, Phil, does that, are you coming to that through, at the end, is there a gap at some sort that's saying, hey, here's what, the problem is, or that they think there is for salespeople that says, hey, we need training, right? I mean, is there some breakdown that's saying that they need training? And I'm wondering again, what narrative would they articulate that would say, hey, you know what, it's not that. It's really, as you were talking to earlier, it's how the teams work together, and what pain or what issues would they say that would allow us to say, hey, you know what, no, it's not a training issue. It's a, again, kind of an ecosystem issue, or a, or we're selling to the wrong people with the wrong product. We're not supplying them with, what we need. I mean, what, does that make sense?
Kind of. I mean, I think there is a training opportunity there in order to say, okay, this group we're going to teach this way, and this group we're going to teach that way, right? Okay. But the business doesn't want to operate that way, right? They don't want to operate that way yet. They want one-off. I want to teach something, and then Eric know how to sell it, and then I want to teach something else, and then Helen know how to sell it. Like, it's not. They're not. They don't consider they understand the difference in their role by segment that they're penetrating, but they don't understand the fact that there's not a one-size-fits-all training that can happen in one instance. So the level of effort, if they want it one-to-one as far as catered to audience, then they need to give us the runway to be able to do that and do that effectively. And then we need to hold the product marketing team accountable. We need to own the prospect marketing team accountable as far as what's the content that you're driving, and you're making sure that all of that messaging and all that content is alignment. So that way, we're not moving in different directions with the same product for the same people.
And that's what I was trying to get to was, I mean, again, when training is normally requested, it's about skills and knowledge or attitudes, right? KSAs. It's not about, the customer, or maybe, again, it's not about the go-to-market or so that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
It's not about.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you end up in a discussion of, hey, is this really a training challenge or not, the ship has already set sail. And it's also the wrong conversation. I think there's a whole slew of upstream activities that are problematic for sales enablement people, which has to do with, for example, like what is our go-to-market and do we truly understand it? And when it comes to the go-to-market, that's just it's a bit of a red herring because markets don't write checks, people do. Businesses don't write checks, people do. And salespeople talk to people. And who's got eyes on that? Hardly anybody. It's overgeneralized into personas or whatever. So I think there's a bit of a false sense of security in a lot of routine activity that people bet on, whereas we're coming at it from what's really required. And that's a whole different ball of wax. Is how do we illuminate? Look, we're on a journey to drive conversations. The conversations we're trying to create are conversations around our platform. Our platform conversations require us to have a rolled up view of our value across all of these disparate parts. Nobody's looking at all the disparate parts except us. And therefore we're gonna try to figure this out, but we can't project plan it because we have to emerge to it. Like there's a there's a whole bunch of problems with the muscle memory of people internally, including executives. So it won't boil down to a training problem. It'll boil down to a patience problem, a patience to think it through problem. And oh, that's too academic, that's too strategic. Even this conversation would lose people would time out on it in most cases because it's quote unquote too academic or strategic or something. So sales and marketing is full of the impatient ones that don't have these conversations. And I think that's the challenge of orchestrators is how do we have that discussion?
I think that's really interesting in that like I find that depending on what level you're speaking with in the organization, the patience changes. So one of the plates I'm spinning right now is just adapting something that I'm delivering to AEs for a BDE kind of idea. And I was, tentative about that, but just seeing some synergies because it's all based around prospecting. But without getting too much in the weeds, I talked to the VP of that part of my company, and yeah, just let's put them through it, all that kind of stuff. So like then I started to talk about the team a little bit, and he has some really senior people underneath him, and they have an entirely different viewpoint of that, and they're very engaged, and they also have individually different perspectives on the BDE's workflow. So once I got to that level, like everybody started to have patience and understand, and now the VP's like, okay, take the time you need to make this as relevant as possible and see what needs to happen. So for me, it ends up being, some of it's the two-way stuff that you talked about before and just that trust and value of brand, but some of it is also getting to the right person, because it may start with, at least for me, it starts with somebody at the quote unquote, stakeholder decision maker level, but the actual work and the understanding doesn't get done until I click a level below that.
Yeah, where the reality is, the real conversations are happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge that I think I can definitely relate to right now as well. Can you hear me better?
Yeah.
Better now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I can relate to right now because what's happening is, in our ecosystem, we grow through acquisition, right? And they're strategic acquisitions, and it makes sense in order, for our end-to-end portfolio and whatnot. But it's messy to begin with. And what I'm experiencing right now is that we have a very aggressive forecasting based on what we believe is the market opportunity through this acquisition. But the assumption is that we'll be able to monetize that quickly, right? So Bill owns a small company, there's 30 people, but they're really good at this niche. Once we get that niche, the market opportunity is, 3 billion. So we believe we can capture X amount of that within year one of acquiring Bill's company. The reality is that that's stupid, because that's assuming that we're going to be able to be as good as Bill's team and what they do very quickly and use our workforce in our existing customer base to penetrate Bill's niche at a high level. So we're having very aggressive, forecasting projections, and obviously that trickles down to the sales agent, right? And we have a hand in that, because if they're not hitting their number, then they must not know what they're doing, and they need training, right? So, I think all of that stuff is very relevant, because the messaging is very different. At a senior leadership sales level, I can just say, okay, well, I want everyone to sell 5 deals with Bill's product this month. Super simple strategy, right? The reality is we don't have the 27 years experience that Bill's team has in that niche, and understanding that niche and being able to message that niche and include it in a very different product set. We're used to selling, cheeseburgers and pizza, and now we're being asked to sell, yeah, there you go, whatever, right? Now we're being asked to sell, washing machines with cheeseburgers and pizza, right? They're like completely different things. They're completely different things. And even though it's the best washing machine in the world, and if you eat these cheeseburgers, you're going to need a washing machine anyways, it's not a natural muscle that's built. So they have to learn the niche, they have to establish the muscle, and then they have to be really, really good about how it fits in the portfolio in order to be able to sell the end-to-end solution. And that takes a lot of time. For salespeople don't want to sell anything new because it probably doesn't work right, and they're gonna find all the breaks, right? It doesn't work the way it's supposed to, and I'm going to find all the process breaks and the use case situations that you did not plan for, whoever you are. That's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a good point, and the acquisition side of it adds more parts to the Tinker Toys, or more parts, more Legos to the toolkit. So the assumption is it's a spreadsheet. Down the left side is your customer, your entire customer list. The column headers are all the Legos, product 1 through product 47. And all we have to do is sell all 47 products to each row. So the more products we add, the more columns we have, the more money we're going to make. So we just need to buy companies, and we just need to crank up the product launches and do 50 product launches this year. So when we add all those products and buy all those companies, we'll have 4 times the amount of stuff to sell, which means we're 4 times bigger, which means we need 4 times the amount of salespeople. And it doesn't, right, I wish it's the black box challenge of selling. And then, oh, those salespeople don't know what they're doing because they can't talk about it. It becomes, our salespeople are broken because we've done all this work to go buy companies and all this work to launch products. It's the sales team that's broken. And that is prevalent in a go-to-market model like you wouldn't believe. It's one of the underlying biases of the entire ecosystem of selling. And there are whole careers, CEO careers built on that spreadsheet, including CEOs getting fired because they can't execute that spreadsheet because it doesn't work that way. We've got case study after case study of that doesn't pan out. Yet McKinsey and all the management consulting firms say, well, you do the simple math and here's what you need. You just need more headcount. And then that doesn't work.
Well, because eventually certain people, if you get enough headcount, you're going to have enough people that are pioneers that can illustrate success. And I think that's how it really actually grows, is by having those pioneers, right? It's like having the mole, right? The pioneers are the ones that are brave and don't mind getting in the crap in order to find the gold. And then as people see more pioneers having success, then the muscles start, the curiosity takes over, and they start to engage at a deeper level at that point in time. But that's not a fast process. That's not and that's really not an enablement strategy either. Is saying, let's make sure we have some ringers somewhere in there, and then that'll just fix the problem.
Well, now you hit the second underlying premise, which is those people that have figured it out, those pioneers, we should align to them. Not only should we find them and recognize them, we should align to them and we should figure out how they do it and figure out how to help others do it. But that actually doesn't happen because what those pioneers are doing is not what was planned for. 99% of the time, they're either building their own content, they're having their own discussions with executives, and they're spending most of their time fighting the company internally than they are spending with clients.
Yeah, and then they burn out after 3 years, and they made their money, they burnt out, and then they go somewhere else and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's the way this looks. So we have Scott's been talking about this forever, but the more connections you have and the more parts you have in your portfolio, so the more widgets and the more people you got to talk to. The horizontal is the people, and the parts is capabilities, products, however you want to look at it. It's a simple 2x2, but when you look at, okay, if you have one person to talk to about one widget and we're selling water, then let's just get it done. You don't need a consultative sales force to sell water. Yet CEOs will do that because they don't have this 2x2 view, right? We need to sell higher. We need to be more consultative. Okay, well, how are you bundling your widgets then to 3 people in procurement? Like, this is a whole pattern. And there are ecosystems behind each of these, by the way. The ecosystem view, people, process, information, technology, all of the enablement behind each quadrant is different. And most companies have multiple quadrants and multiple sales teams in each. Then you say, okay, well, we're going to go be a solution provider. We're going to be an expert. So we're going to go buy a bunch of companies and launch 30 products next year. And we're going to be problem solvers in a specific domain. When you go from left to right, so red to green here, you're completely changing the whole entire ecosystem. It is not product based, it's customer based, and most people have no idea what that looks like. And then, oh, we want to be top right. We want to sell every product we can to everybody we can, which means we're going to drive outcomes. And the salespeople view of it is like, great, now I've got to navigate not only different wallet owners, but different budget centers, different cost centers. This is unfunded. We don't have a line and a budget. We have to go create what's possible with people and connect the dots and go find more money unfunded, the more top right we are. And then they're getting pressure internally. Let's inspect you. Where's your meetings? Let's micromanage the shit out of you because you don't know what you're doing. And nobody's talking about what it takes to actually have a conversation that connects the dots about all these parts. Nobody's got that answer. So this is the challenge of the sales relationships, and these rhythms that need to be built are hidden, and most sales teams are not organized by these rhythms, and the enablement behind them is genericized to cover all of them. So you end up with a more, our salespeople are broken problem, as opposed to what's the message of the bottom right? What skills do the bottom right sellers need? Who are the actual decision makers? And what's that network of people in the bottom right that we're trying to sell to? So this is a enablement problem. This is why orchestration is important.
What I what I have seen is that to support the right-hand side, when it comes to thinking about roles and thinking about organization, it's so very, very important to step away from being locked into rigid organizational teams and organizational or positional sales roles. That you have to go to a more agile approach, where you are looking at, well, I, as one of the sales guys in a sales team with multiple sales guys, what role do I play in this particular sales project to this particular customer? Because that team and the solution is going to be bespoke, not a commodity it's a bespoke team, it's a bespoke solution. And therefore, the who is doing what among all of the sales guys in that sales team, that needs to be crystal clear to make the whole thing efficient. So alongside having positional sales roles, my experience is you need to have, or it's very helpful to have what can be called project sales roles. So who is responsible for the relationships with certain parts of the customer organization. It might be one guy, it might be several guys. Who is responsible for identifying what the win strategy is when you have come so far that you are actually one of the top 3 solutions that the customers are choosing between. So things like that. So it's another level, if you like, of role thinking, and also of thinking about the messages, how to refine the messages to support this bespoke solution that you bring to the customer.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, isn't that my experience recently? Is that some of the companies that I was working with when I was looking for a vendor for an incentive management program, right? And how they were structured. Companies like SAP and Vericent and Exactly, for that matter. When they had people interfacing with me at that point, right? I mean, I imagine they have that fairly structured in terms of here's a relationship person that you start with, and then they're going to bring in a technology person and give you a demo, and then they're going to bring in the team and do some configuration about what you really need, and then let's bring in this particular group because you're going to have your IT department in, and I would imagine that's fairly well choreographed, unless I'm talking off base in terms of how that works. Maybe it depends on who's on the staff and the type of how big of the opportunity is for that group. Whether or not they want to bring in the big guns or just let just a smaller team handle it. Or
Yeah. So on that vein, Phil, when you look at what your company's doing, are you guys orchestrated? Do you guys have a lot of people involved in the sale? And then what kind of quadrants do you guys play in? And I call it the from what to what. Are you guys shifting quadrants in your sales strategy?
Yeah, I think that's the goal, is to shift quadrants. I mean, I think that's the goal, is probably be in the bottom right now,
Mhm.
I think is the goal. I can tell you the muscle is in the bottom left, as in say, oh, you have a problem, here's a solution, boom, done. And then
Yeah.
60 days down the road, you got cross-sell, upsell, and they'll be like, oh shit, they didn't sell you this, or this. Cool, I'll take care of it. And part of the reason is behavioral, right? There's effort, and there's behavior components in that. But if I think about it, if I'm a acquisition sales rep, I mean, just transparency, do their quota obligations align with their roles?
Right.
Right.
Well, that's why a lot of this is an ecosystem problem,
It's
not a
so I
rep
think
problem.
most of it is the bottom left, just because I give a monthly quota, even though I'm in enterprise, and the average deal takes 120 days, right? So
But
you
you
do
have
the
a
math
monthly
there.
quota.
But I
Yeah.
have a monthly quota, so you do the math there. Should I attach this really, really great product that Mark is a great candidate for? But I know that it extends the sales cycle 60 days, and it's the third week of the month, and I'm a little behind. No, I'm not going to do it. We can add it later, right? So we want to. I think we want to be in the bottom right now, because we're not there, right? We have the ability to be there, and the big deals are there. The big deals are, further and fewer between, though, in comparison to a lot of the transactional components that happen. And we do a fair amount of work in the ESB segment, which you're talking to the CFO, the CEO, the COO, the CMO, and the person that answers the phone, right? So, you don't necessarily, you could be in bottom right and be talking to one person in that situation. But typically, you know, I think the goal is for everyone to be in the bottom right now, and the reality is most of them are in the bottom left. As we go up market, there's more of the bottom right. And you know, I think the perception is probably that we're actually in the top right with those type of deals, but the reality is we're probably more in the bottom right with those type of deals right now, just based on where we're at maturity wise. So
Yep.
you know, talk to me about the top left. Is that basically I'm your customer, but I'm really costing you more than like I have a high cost margin there?
It's actually like a low cost. It's like a hardware, it's like a computer device hardware company, like Dell or something, just selling $3 million worth of desktops. They aggregate spend.
Okay.
So that's a strategy to be kind of the aggregator or the one-stop shop view.
Okay. And we're moving kind of in that direction with a lot of online buy type of solutions for our smaller segments, which I think makes sense there.
Yeah. And I think, Bill, you guys have moved, you guys have gone through a lot of change too. How would your company plot out on the 2x2 here from your perspective? Because I know you've been transforming.
So I built something that was a little bit more discovery oriented because we had a lot of transactional selling happening, and that's going to happen given we can complete sales at the manager level, at least transactional ones. And then we have people that are so deep into accounts, they might be top left. I use that death of a B2B salesman that Forrester has kind of backed away from slowly since whenever they released it, but with the idea of like trying to get people to think consultatively, but we're still in that process. So we've got some people that are, I sell to managers, you know, I replace people on their team because we have staffing and managed services. We have some people that are looking at a whole host of those people, and they're more like navigators. So I don't know if that's what we're talking about as far as aggregators go, where they might know more of the company internals than some of the individual, you know, people do. But then our most elite people are in the top right because they're looking at customer outcomes. The drive, it's interesting though, like because of comp plans, because of a few different things, the drive is not necessarily to get everybody to that level, but the drive is to get everybody asking the questions that at least allows them to say, okay, you have this problem at your level. What are all of the business drivers that are happening that are causing this issue? And then then we start to help them connect the dots to see the bigger picture. So I don't know if that exactly places us in a mission to get to the top right, but it's as I start working with different sales teams across the company that do different things, it's kind of like people coming from different directions to get to the same goal. So I think we will eventually get there, but we're not there yet.
That's cool. Makes sense.
I hope. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
what's happening. I don't know if it's necessarily the right thing, but I'm also limited by how many plates I can spin, you know, at once.
Yeah. And also I mean, it's kind of one of those things where what's the strategy and how's it unfolding too?
Yeah.
All companies are moving from here to there. It just depends on how they define it.
Yep. Yep. It's getting defined internally at different levels rather than coming down from one particular spot. So that's what also makes it complex, you know, and different people have views of what their team's success should be. So some people are very strategic and some people are transactional. So getting some marriage, like stakeholder management for me is quite a job.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That makes sense.
The interesting thing is, for me, it's almost the opposite because we come from a very bespoke product world, and we didn't even have products for a long time. They were just solutions which have been tailored to all our customers. So our salespeople are used to sales cycles which are over 1 year. You need to make a lot of connections to the buyers on the customer side. But now our industry is transitioning over to technology, which is allowing to be more transactional. So we need to do the opposite side, where we need to take those salespeople and develop them in a way that they sell something much quicker and in a different way. And the revenue is also much lower. So that's actually our challenge.
Wow. That's interesting. So they didn't kind of create a new sales team to be more transactional. They're taking the consultative outcome sellers and asking them to sell more transactionally.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. Now, the tricky bit is that our products are still also not completely set up like this. So you can't sell them out of the box. So our sales enablement challenge is also how to get a product readiness in place, which makes sure that a seller would have all these components, whether it's content or contracts or just a billing mechanism and so on in place, so that they actually can sell something which has less than a 1-year sales cycle.
Wow. Really interesting. I wonder what's going to happen. You know, I've heard a lot of it the other way. What's that?
At the moment, it's clashing and crashing in some points, and there's people saying, "Oh, we only have farmers. We don't have real hunters in our sales teams." And it's so stepping out of it. It's interesting. Being in it is quite challenging, I must say.
Yeah, maybe these slides will help you because they work a lot. They work really well. The left side is go to market. The right side is go to customer. So go to market is what's our total addressable market? How do we carpet bomb everybody? And the more we talk to, the more they're going to buy from us. Go to customer is we're very bespoke. We have consultative sellers who are experts in their field. We're trying to map into the client organization. We're trying to become a partner with them over the long term. We're worried about things like, you know, implementation and consulting with them to make sure our solutions work. You know, that's the right side. So if they're going, usually it goes, we want to move from left to right, and that clashes, which is what Phil's going to deal with, where his whole go-to-market engine is built around products and product, and we're a very technical product in an engineering culture, and the idea of connecting across with a message is going to be a foreign concept at Phil's organization, where yours is, Sasha is like, okay, well, we are working on message. We are about relationship. We're about co-owning and having accountability for outcomes. Now you want me to sell like watches and be transactional? Are you kidding me? Like, how do I even do that? Right? It's really fascinating to go from right to left. I haven't seen a lot of companies trying to do that. I've seen a lot of companies build what I think Phil brought up, which was more online e-commerce or web solutions to transact and sell widgets that way. But to take an outcome sales force and have it become more transactional is really not, there's not a lot of companies doing that.
Now, the interesting thing is that we don't want to give it up completely. We just see that the revenues are declining because of our products being more commodity. And then we need to add on other things. And we can't survive with the old sales cycles. So there is that pressure of reducing that significantly in order to bring in more deals with less revenue. And that's actually kind of almost contradictory. Yeah.
It makes sense.
That makes a lot more sense to me, and that resonates with my experience a little bit, because I get the fight of our VPs saying, well, I want people to sell outcomes, but I also want them to turn things quickly. And so, you know, I have somebody who's brand new in staffing, and the first thing that they don't do is go try to sell managed services, because that's going to be a much slower turn. And if they're hitting a ramp and they've got a target, it takes a little bit of time to do one versus the other. So some of that transactional selling puts food on the table, but at the same time, it can't just stay at a transaction, and they need to start building a bigger picture of the organization, or they lose. So it's a little bit of a quandary as far as that goes. But I think I'm hoping that makes sense, Sasha, with what you said, that like people just need to get some food on the table versus these sort of long drawn out equations.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is that also our sales managers are not compensated. So they don't get a big bonus when they sell something. They almost get the same salary flat out. And it doesn't matter so much whether they sell more or less. So they even not really compensated for going more out and hunting. They're compensating for farming for a long time.
Yep. Wow. Phil, does that help you at all resonate with what you're up against too? Really, is that relatable on your side?
Yeah, I'm just glad you guys have problems too. You know, I mean, you know, it's
Yeah,
you know, I think the biggest challenging piece right now in articulating all of these things that are happening and all these things for consideration is, it's great we can identify all the problems and we can see all the things that are bullshit, and we can see, you know, the niches of things that are good and whatnot. But you know, I don't necessarily think that the playbook is wrong. It's about how do you implement it when you're in the middle of a specific component, as opposed to, you know, chartering a team and creating the function of sales enablement within an organization, right? You know, I think I've mentioned this previously. You know, every couple of weeks I get a new curveball, right? Like, you know, it's like, oh, hey, we've got these people that are kind of like, you know, sales engineers and kind of like sellers. We don't believe they belong over here. Let's put them in sales enablement. So now I have product SMEs that essentially are on sales calls. There's sales engineers as far as I'm concerned, you know. So now that's a piece of my organization. So that's the perception of headcount in the sales enablement vein. And where there's overlap, yes, and messaging and functionality and product certification, all that kind of stuff, they don't add the talent component that I actually need on my team, which is, you know, role architecture and content development and delivery and right. So you know, and now we're talking about adding the cross-sell upsell component and the partner channel as well. So now I'm talking about, you know, partner enablement as well as, you know, sales enablement for upsell, cross-sell, and then budgeting out, you know, what does the headcount look like owning global enablement, you know, in 2022, right? So it's like I don't know, the ink is not dry on the current problems, right? And the strategy on how to triage that, and we're getting more layers on because I'm illustrating value in a short period. Say, oh, you know, this guy, these guys know what they're doing. Cool, let's give them more stuff before they actually even have an operating and engagement model that's in a normalizing, in a stage of norming. You know what I mean? So that's where I think I have the key challenge right now is strategizing the future when I don't really have a clarity on the current state of how we want to formalize the enablement function within the organization, right? So that's why I think it's funny. The first time we talked about this, Brian, I was like, "Oh yeah, what are the numbers?" So like, we got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. It's like a buffet, and I was like, you know, there's only so much room on the plate for components of the buffet, and if you put it all together, it kind of tastes like shit, anyways, right? But
yeah.
you know, where do you start? And then how do you triage and go backwards while also going forwards and in separate work streams and some of these things? So
yeah, it's very very non-linear.
Very non-linear.
It's back and forth, it's constant.
Shoots and ladders is what it feels like.
And that's what progress is too.
So Phil, talking about buffets, why don't you do like you do when you set up a Swedish smorgasbord? which is a buffet of buffets, because
with
what you
Swedish
do,
meatballs.
what you do is not just that, you place out God knows how many different types of dishes. You actually group them, and you also eat them in a certain order. So
Right.
you group the cold fish dishes, and then you have the cold meat dishes, and then you have the hot fish dishes, and then you have the meat dishes, and then the cold. To start again, I'm confused myself here. Cold fish dishes, cold meat dishes, hot fish dishes, hot meat dishes, and then all of the desserts as the bomb at the end. But the point is that I was thinking about your problem there. Where do I start? What do I do? There are so many things on the buffet to choose from. Well, can you think about it in like a theme-based approach? What buffet areas, what initiatives, what things on your plate can you group together in logical, bigger entities that actually has a linkage to your company's go-to-market or customer strategy that clearly supports different areas of customers your company's go-to-market or customer strategy?
Yeah, and
clear?
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, conceptually, it makes sense, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do is say, where are the big rocks, right? Let's focus on the big rocks first, right? When does training happen, right? What does learning look like, right? There's some like big critical gaps there. But in the buffet situation, we're being asked to sell cold fish, cold pudding, hot ribs, you know what I mean, all in
And
one
flaming
basket.
Cheetos and Cheetos.
And I'm in an equation where I have a team I have an enablement team, right? But I'm teaching the dishwasher how to serve, and the servers how to cook, and the hostesses how to, wash dishes, right? So we've got different people in roles that don't necessarily align with what their function is in the grand scheme of the things at the same time, right? So I'm opening a restaurant and I have a bunch of construction workers that actually don't know how to cook, right? At the same time. So, it's about, to me, it's about just kind of, I'm trying to focus on the big rocks. I'm trying to like hone in on those and get a foundation. But the big rocks keep, shift every few weeks with a new curveball is what I'm saying there. And it's about, what are the big rocks here where we want to focus on depending on where our organization is. And then how does that migrate into the rest of the playbook in other pieces and whatnot, right? Which pieces do we prioritize over others? And I guess that's why we get paid to figure those things out, right? But I think that's really kind of the key obstacle that I have right now is I have a plan. I start building a plan. I believe this is the plan, and then something pretty dramatic changes, and now I have to reevaluate my plan and say, okay, if that does happen in 2 months, is this plan today? What pieces of this are going to fall out? Meaning, I've now deprioritized them, right? And I'm prioritizing other pieces. So it's a constant. It feels like a weekly prioritization, deprioritization is kind of what it feels like at the moment, right? And then I don't know about you guys, but then you have to like live life and have a spouse and kids, and
That's when it's hard to not get into the transactional stuff then and get into response enablement because it sucks you in.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So I'm trying to stay out of the weeds, but I'm kind of, getting pulled in here and pulled in there. And then one person makes a mistake, and then, and then it's like, oh, we got this 3 walls of governance now because one person screwed up, right? So, it's just, it's dynamic, and that's what I'm really looking at from the playbook standpoint. All of these pieces are really, there's value in all of these pieces. But if I'm on 6, then I have to go to 3, and then I have to go to 9. Like where do I want to really kind of say, 2, 7, and 8 are my non-negotiables no matter what all the time, right?
Running some type of diagnostic, and just kind of putting together a grid of, I hate to say like your ideal state, but here's all the challenges, listed out, and then
Or you flip it and go, I like the anchors, like here's our North Star, here's our North Star
Right.
vision, here's our principles that we will not move or waver from. For example, we will have to reprioritize weekly, we get it. However, we will drive towards services. So how do we leverage that constraint as a strength? That is a big part of management today, is looking at constraints and flipping them into, let me leverage this and get momentum somehow, as opposed to having it all figured out. You kind of using the momentum of the organization against itself somehow. Like what does that look like?
Phil, do you feel you have a slab in your restaurant already? So the restaurant that is built for you or that you are building, is there a slab already, which is kind of the basis of, or could be the basis of all of your work?
Like a foundation? No.
Yeah, foundation.
I'm establishing the foundation right now. That's kind of what I'm doing. I've got a roadmap and stuff like that, and I've got the foundation piece, right? So, in the grand scheme of things, I'm going to stick to the foundation, and all this other curveball stuff is just like, yeah, I'll see what I can do. And then it's sorry, I can't do that because, but I want to be really cognizant of the sorries, because people keep score on the sorries as opposed to the milestones. And we talked about this last week, where I don't actually have the ability to articulate metrics of impact because we don't have any benchmarks, right? So we're focusing on milestones as our success criteria, and milestone success criteria will only get you so far when it comes to articulating resources and headcount and budget, et cetera, right? So
but
that's
Phil,
yeah,
a
go ahead.
question. When you say that, you are counting the sorries, who are you saying sorry to? Is it
No,
everyone who come up with an idea and want to have a piece of your abilities and capabilities in your teams to do something that they see as very important? Or is it that you have to continuously say sorry to the key stakeholders of the organization that actually
right.
have given you, the job to do this?
For sure, yeah, and let me clarify. I'm not actually saying sorries. I'm anticipating the action of saying sorries when we fall short on specific things because of resourcing, right? So
Yeah.
coming from sales and knowing, the leadership in sales on the acquisition side, acquisition is always going to be more aggressive. Always going to be, it's less empathetic. It's more action and result, right? As opposed to cross-sell, upsell, customer lifecycle, nurturing, and all that kind of greatness, right? So that's what I'm saying, is anticipating the messaging coming there. It's a high level of effort to establish the foundation right away, right? Which I'm doing, and there's there's critical gaps in onboarding. There's critical gaps in, new product introduction. So the critical gaps are around as well. On top of that, Brian, the boss, is saying, hey, Phil, I want you to do this innovation thing, right? Because we really need to do this. We really need to know this. So Brian's thinking bigger picture, and I'm just trying to, keep the train somewhere close to the tracks at the moment while rebuilding the foundation of the tracks, right? So there's not actually sorries that are tallying up, but I understand, knowing my buyer, knowing my customer, right? In the mindset that typically comes there, I have to be really strategic about what I allow to fail and how many failures I allow, as opposed to the successes that I articulate. Because personally, I want to do a massive reorganization in the people that I have in order to carry this mission, right? I can't do that if I
and a
don't
lot
have
of
the confidence up here that I can carry the torch, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that is messaging and stakeholder management and spending all your time there instead of sucked into the day-to-day, which is which is hard.
Correct. Yeah. Bobbing and weaving in between my frontline guys in the trenches, and then the stakeholders at the sales leadership levels.
Yeah. So one of the things that has helped me before is something like this, where it's kind of a journey that says, look, hey, executives, we're really fragmented right now. What you're asking me to be is more managed. I got to get to managed. And this little atomic thing in the middle, are the funding I get, the inputs I have, the resources I need, the outputs I produce, that little atomic building block will morph over time. If you look at it, projects, programs, services in the middle, right? So I've used this talk track before, and I say, where do you think I am? And they actually pretty much nail it. If I think I'm fragmented, they think, yeah, you're fragmented. I'd put you over there. Okay, well, can we use this as a way to work together? Because you're asking me to be more managed. How do I got to get there. That means I got to change my funding, change my inputs, change my resources, and change my outputs. I mean, that's the only way to get over there. I have to change that stuff. I have a roadmap I'm going to change that stuff with, but I keep getting, randomized. I keep getting arbitrary requests, generic asks, to do stuff. I'm ad hoc. I got to be more managed. So how do I, here's my plan to do that. What do you think? And then here's the friction that's going to happen. I'm going to get blowback. So that's one slide that might help. What do you think?
Yeah. Anytime I look at these things, I always think about, what's the vernacular that needs to change based on the target audience. That's really what I think about.
Yeah, they might not use the word chaotic or random.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's like
Because
the message.
chaotic sounds offensive. Are you calling my organization a piece of crap? You know what I mean? Like some people, like, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
sensitivity around words in a lot of
Uh-huh.
instances. So it's I'm thinking about my target buyer, right? My target customer, who's internal.
Mhm.
But yeah.
It's the journey over time, and having, how do you have the conversation that says what got us here is not going to get us there? How do we change? What are we changing? It's like, how do we get to a managed state of sales enablement? You can't just wave your magic wand.
I find this a very good and true representation of the reality I have experienced. And also, I think one should always be aware of the fact that in most organizations, going from the fragmented to the adaptive approach, I mean, we're not talking about a couple of months. We're talking about a couple of years, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's very it's depicting very well.
Yeah, the challenge, I think, Phil, what I'm sensing is, like, let's say you have the treatment plan, you have the diagnosis, it's the host body, and its willingness to let you go from one state to the next. And how do you do that without knocking heads or being overly,
Yeah.
Like, if they're overly sensitive to any change in the system, yet the system's changing all the time.
Would there be kind of like a, again, if this is a talk track or discussion track, which I think it certainly can be, and maybe just before that is your your pre-work. Okay, before I get into this, hey, let me walk you through this. Let me do a little bit of, gather some ideas and thoughts and things to think about ahead of time, so that you're prepared to walk them through this with examples, obviously, with metrics if need be, with anecdotes, and of course, who's this targeted to? Phil, is it just your one individual, or is this? And for some companies, does the person who's in enablement have the the clout to have this conversation, to be at that table, to have that conversation as well? It certainly sounds as you do, Phil.
Yeah.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think what's nice when you look at this view, and I think it's the slide that might come after this, which is, what do I need to get from fragmented to managed, right? What are the resources that we need? What are the technology? What are the people? What's the investment that needs to happen in order to get there? And then not just the investment component, but who are the stakeholders that need to actually be a part of that situation, right? You think about an organization with frontline managers that are young in career, right? They're learning how to lead, let alone learning how to be partners with enablement in reinforcing the message and the mission. So there's some critical pieces there that, if we say, well, we want to be in column 2, because right now we're in column 1, I need 3 people to do it. That's a very, very narrow-minded message of what the actual effort is to get from here to there, and the resources and the players in that equation, right? So that's kind of what I see right now. we just drew up, the equation I gave you earlier about, adding more groups and support, and then going global. The headcount goes from 8 to 27, with 2 groups that were added. Now there's critical gaps right now, and I understand the equation of ask for 3 and get 1 if you're lucky, right? So, I understand those games when it comes to budget and headcount and resource, but I think that's a critical kind of value add piece, and saying, here's where we're at. What do we need to get from here to there? What does that look like? If I'm fragmented right now, what does current state look like?
Yeah, and where do you put me, and what labels would you give this, bosses or executives? Like, have them take some ownership of it and have them put their fingerprints on it, because then you can engage in that conversation on your terms. Right now, they're dictating to you, and that's not going to fit your plan, because you're the only one thinking it through, and they're going to assume that you need, and they're going to just start throwing stuff at you. So how do you have this? You flip it and say, okay, I get this is going to be a hard conversation, and I know this is maybe strategic or whatever, but I'm going to go for it, because if I don't have this conversation, I'm going to end up doing 4 times the amount of work handling, personnel issues 6 months from now, with people are like, he's asking me to do stuff that isn't in my job description or whatever. That's going to be a lot more harder to deal with than executives about what does the word chaotic really mean, or random. That's a conversation that actually might be worth having as an example, so that you can nip that that low level stuff will eat you alive.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? And walking into a group of individuals that are now being asked to become an organization, you're not just having that conversation with your stakeholders. You're having it with your own team, right? In order to take a clear assessment of who we are and where we're at, and who we want to be and where we want to be, and
yeah, and
how
you got to get
there.
to some sort of functional value, or else everybody's gonna be looking for a job 2 years, or be swallowed up by marketing or whatever. So this is one of those, we get to control our own destiny. We must define functionally what our value is, and we're not a function right now. We're positioned on an org chart with a group of people hanging out. What is our value contribution, unit to unit? What makes us different than product marketing or engineering or brand marketing or corporate communications that have been here way longer than us?
Right.
So
I have a list of people that I need to add, right, in my headcount piece on going, to get to the middle column. Or like, this is what I want, and this is what I need. It's a combination of people and technology, right? And
right.
I can
Yeah.
put one platform in place and replace an LMS, a knowledge base, a content library, a coaching platform, and a Tableau dashboard. With one
Right.
resource, I can replace 5 fragmented resources.
Right.
But those are the kind of things you need to tell a story on in between those 3 different columns that you were showing. I think that
Yeah.
really
This
helps
is,
the
column
resonation.
1 from here to there, from here to there, from here to there, right? So that's each of those. And so I'll send these slides out. Yeah, it's a it's a messaging thing. A lot of this is, Cool. All right. So I know we're running out of time. We have 10 minutes left. We didn't get too much into the playbook, but we talked through how sales teams are organized and also the ecosystem behind them with this view, which I think is helpful because that's, Phil, where you can start is, if we're moving from left to right here, what does that actually mean and what does that look like? And then based on that, how do you move from fragmented to managed? And what services are you providing? And the playbook helps with that, thinking that through, right? We didn't get into this, but as you said, it's very non-linear. So when you look at it in that view, we were on slide or number 7, improving value, impact, and pockets. What maybe there's a way to take this conversation and do both. It's acting tactically and strategically at the same time to use the organization's momentum, against itself to achieve your goals, right? So what quick wins do they think they're getting from you that actually serve the broader move to managed? That's what this idea of value impact is. So it's not the random asks, it's the one thing that you think is a Trojan horse to get to managed, whether it's a program, an initiative, what is that one thing that shows what managed can look like? Is it a product launch? Is it next year's kickoff? What can you run in a managed way?
Yeah.
Is it onboarding?
Right. I'm just thinking about surviving Q3. Don't talk to me about next year's kickoff. Like, come on, man. That is an interesting topic, though. I think July is a lot of when in-person engagements are projected to start kind of picking up again. So I'm curious if anyone's being asked to do something then.
Oh, for when people are getting back together in person? What are you
Yeah,
doing with our sales teams?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily in a kickoff capacity, but in a holy crap, I'm tired of Zoom. Let's hang out together and talk about some things and maybe learn about some things and have some type of workshop engagement or something like that.
I haven't heard of any.
I think you should hold it at the Atlantis, Phil.
Yeah, I got invited.
I think there is,
something.
I've heard is next year, like January 2020.
Okay. Yeah, I got invited to something in June in Dallas, some thought leadership sales enablement thing. I thought I sent it to you.
Yeah.
But maybe I didn't.
I saw that.
Invited to that. And then, within our organization, I think that July is when the offices will start opening up again for vaccinated employees.
Oh, this July?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That's cool.
But it'll be small pockets though, right? It'll be small pockets. It's a lot of good conversation today and really cool analogies, I would think as well. Like, the cold fish, smelly fish, hot this.
Yeah, the buffet of the buffet.
If you can work that into your playbook, Brian, I think it would be had a lot more value.
We may have to go to Sweden and see how it's done.
You're welcome.
All right.
We can all
In
stay at
January.
Helena's house.
In January.
That's right.
Awesome.
Well,
Awesome.
so next week, so I do have, Sasha, I do have draft of the house, the end state. So you and Mark were talking about like, okay, we're doing all this stuff, but like at the end of level 3, what the heck does it even look like? And I gave that a shot with kind of an operating model view. And one of the things, Phil, that may help is walking through that next week, which is, you know, you've got people, things you got to work through, organizational things, technology things, operational things. These are the components of your operating model. And each of those are at play underneath the roadmap, right? So the roadmap is like, here's the route we're driving cross country with, but what is the car? Well, the car has enablement stuff we're doing, people stuff, how we're managing stakeholders, what we're actually producing, how we're operationalizing, how we're measuring, all that stuff, which is underneath all of the roadmap. And so I had built a view of that house of what that might look like. It doesn't look like a house. It looks like something else. It looks like a turbine engine. But I can show that next week. That might help you think through the components, because as you're talking about moving to manage, you can use something like this to say, this is what I mean. I have these 8 components I'm trying to get to a managed state, for example. And that might help.
That's a nice point, because then if people like Phil, everybody actually who's in that situation, same as us, knowing what a possible end state could be, having that blueprint that Helena was talking about, helps then define the actions that we take today to build everything underneath, right? So the foundation and all the other elements or rooms that we need to do. We might not know that which room is having which color. We might not know every function of every room, but overall we know roughly how many rooms we will need.
Yeah, that's right. And or how big is the house, or how small is the house, right?
Right. That's
Okay.
good.
All right, you guys. Well, I appreciate the time and the conversation. It was good to see everybody. Thanks for coming to the think tank. We'll keep them going. This is in the recording. It'll end up in the recording spot. So when you log in, also we've added a